UFC 126, February 5th, 2011. That is the last time that Jon Jones was in a fight that was not for championship gold, and that was a victory over Ryan Bader. Since then, he has competed in 16 consecutive championship bouts, victories in every single one of them, outside of course, a fight with Daniel Cormier, the rematch, which was a finish for Jon Jones, but would then be overturned. So 15 victories and one no contest in those championship bouts. UFC 195, January 2nd, 2016. That was the last time Stipe Miocic fought in a fight that was not for UFC Championship gold, and that was a first-round TKO victory over Andrei Arlovski, meaning Stipe has competed in 8 consecutive title bouts. Jon Jones has beaten 7 former UFC undisputed champions and 1 former interim champion, making it 8 total. Stipe Miocic has beaten 5 former undisputed UFC champions. On paper, and by the numbers presented here, this is, quite literally, the biggest legacy fight in UFC history. All that build-up, all those numbers, all of that legacy on the line here between Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic. And of course I'm excited. This is huge. This is a monumental, historic fight, especially when you look at the heavyweight division. It's always at the forefront of combat sports. Pair that with Jon Jones' success in the light heavyweight division, a pillar of the UFC dating back to the early days. It doesn't get bigger than this. The most title victories in UFC history for Jon Jones. The most heavyweight title fight victories and title defenses for Stipe Miocic. Jon Jones, a 2-weight world champion. Stipe Miocic, a 2-time heavyweight champion. I mean, the list truly does go on and on and on. But why is my excitement not as high as I would like it to be? Well, the answer is quite simple, and it's a name, not necessarily a sentence or a paragraph or a phrase. It is one man's name, and that is Tom Aspinall. If this fight would have went through last November when it was originally scheduled to take place, you probably wouldn't hear me sounding a little bit upset today, right? That this was a fight that was scheduled to happen last November in Madison Square Garden. Jon Jones tore his pectoral muscle. He has been on the shelf ever since. Stipe Miocic has not fought since March of 2021, where he lost his championship to Francis Ngannou, now fighting for the PFL, now fighting and making millions of dollars, boxing Tyson Fury and boxing Anthony Joshua. I'm going to try to leave Francis out of this as much as possible because he is quite literally thriving post-UFC career. But it's going to be hard to not mention him at least a couple times here. But the more prominent name on the outside looking in of these two competing at UFC 309 is the interim heavyweight champion, Mr. Tom Aspinall, who last November stepped in on less than 2 weeks' notice to face the then backup fighter for Miocic versus Jon Jones, Sergey Pavlovich, at that time the most dangerous, scary man in the UFC, and Tom Aspinall went in on short notice and disposed of him in the very first round by way of knockout, becoming the interim champion. And what happens when someone wins an interim belt? They get to challenge the undisputed champion to unify those titles, but not in this circumstance. And not only is Tom Aspinall not getting the fight with Jon Jones, Tom Aspinall has defended his interim heavyweight championship. Come on, man. In July of this year at UFC 304 in England, we saw Tom Aspinall defend his championship against Curtis Blades, the only man to beat Tom Aspinall in the UFC. Now, we know that was due to a knee injury that happened just 15 seconds into their bout back in July of 2022, but regardless, Tom Aspinall did avenge the lone UFC loss on his record, and more importantly, defended an interim title. And even still, that wasn't enough to get him the fight with Stipe Miocic. That wasn't enough to get him the fight with the undisputed champion that is Jon Jones. It was enough to get him a backup fighter weight cut situation, though. And even then, I can look past it, right? I get it. Jon Jones was scheduled to face Stipe last year. They're making it right to do it this year. They promised it to Stipe. He's getting his opportunity. He's earned it, right? I mean, he is the all-time leader in title defenses, a former two-weight world champion. You know, I'm not all for the length of time out and still getting right in for an immediate shot, but if anybody's going to get that chance, it is someone like Stipe or someone like George St. Pierre that did it when he returned to the middleweight division and beat Michael Bisping many years ago now. So, you know, I can look past Tom just being next to face the winner of this fight. But that doesn't even look like it's going to happen, because this week, Jon Jones has went on record and said,
if you defeat him, will you defend your belt against Aspinall, who has the interim title?
More than likely not. More than likely not.
He will not face Tom Aspinall. He has no interest in facing Tom Aspinall. Dating back to Noche UFC in September, he was on film saying that this was more than likely his retirement fight here at UFC 309. Now, he has kept some hope alive of him continuing to compete after this card, should he, of course, beat Stipe Miocic, but it is not Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall has not impressed Jon Jones, according to him. Instead, he has his eyes pointed toward the light heavyweight champion that is Alex Poatan Pereira, the biggest thing going in mixed martial arts right now and in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Of course, it would be a two-weight world champion in Jon Jones facing a two-weight world champion in Alex Pereira. Light heavyweight is where Alex Pereira currently reigns. We know that is where Jon Jones set all of the records over the course of a near decade and a half. And don't get me wrong, if that fight got booked, if Jon Jones beats Stipe Miocic at UFC 309 this coming Saturday, and it is booked with him and Alex Pereira, of course I'm going to be excited. That is a massive, massive fight. You can't have two bigger fights in terms of legacy for, if you're Jon Jones, than Stipe Miocic, and then pair that back-to-back with Alex Poatan Pereira. But it just ain't right, man. It's Tom Aspinall. It's Jon Jones. That is the fight. That is the past and the present versus the future. That is everything that every true mixed martial arts fan to their core want to see, is the new breed against the old wave. Will it be the first man to ever beat Jon Jones? And of course, I'm looking past Stipe with that talk. I'm not doubting Stipe Miocic. Well, I do have my doubts. As a Stipe fan, he's back there on the wall. I've seen him defend his title at UFC 203. I've met the man in person. But the odds are stacked against Stipe Miocic here, and I think we all realize that. He's 42 years old. He's not getting any younger. He's been out of the octagon for nearly 4 years. The last time he fought was a brutal knockout loss. Everything is against Stipe here. That is why a victory would be one of the greatest title fight victories in UFC history. So now I realize at this point I'm kind of rambling. I'm pulling from three different directions. I'm pulling at Alex Pereira, I'm pulling at Tom Aspinall, and I'm pulling at the realm of possibility that Stipe does win this fight. And on Monday, November 11th, Stipe was on the Ariel Helwani show saying that he's not looking past Jon Jones, which of course is a very Stipe Miocic answer, and I'm not, discrediting him for answering as such, but it just doesn't leave any sort of hope that maybe he's the one that would welcome a fight with Tom Aspinall should he be the champion here, because it seems all but certain that it will not be Jon Jones that steps in to fight Tom Aspinall next. So maybe, just maybe, if Stipe wins here and he doesn't retire, he will give Tom Aspinall the rightful shot to get his opportunity to be an undisputed UFC heavyweight champion. So do you understand my frustrations here? I'm sure you do, because I'm sure you're feeling the same frustrations as well. To the casual fan, this is a huge fight. To the hardcore fan, this is a historic, once-in-a-lifetime borderline fight for the UFC, Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic. But yet it just doesn't feel like the right time and place. I think that is the biggest issue here. Had this happened last year, as I said, I think there would be a lot less complaints, and it would have felt a little bit better at that time, because Tom Aspinall hadn't done what he has now done, knocking out Sergey to become an interim champion, and then defending his interim title this year. But all of the complaining and ranting aside, you look at this fight, Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic. I don't need to get into the X's and O's, guys. We've seen them do it for years and years and years. It's unrivaled greatness. You don't see fights like this happen. The UFC is the king of making the best fight the best. That is why everyone launches toward the UFC. That is why every year they continue to be a global conglomerate in the sport of combat and in mixed martial arts, right? And here, Jon Jones, Stipe Miocic, greatness versus greatness. All of the title defenses and knockouts and submissions and records broken and records held, records continuing to be broken even potentially. How often do we get legacy fights like this? There were a couple that I was trying to think of off the top of my head. You get that return of George St. Pierre at UFC 217 where he beats Michael Bisping, the all-time, welterweight championship winner versus Michael Bisping, who scratched and clawed his way to become the middleweight champion and Ultimate Fighter winner. That was a huge fight for legacy and in terms of greatness versus greatness. We had Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski, specifically Part 1. That felt like a very big legacy fight at that time. We had the trilogy that Stipe Miocic was involved in with Daniel Cormier. That was monumental. Daniel Cormier goes up from light heavyweight to become a two-weight world champion. Then Stipe regains his title. Then they have a great 25-minute bout in the third fight where Stipe was able to retain. Again, they're few and far between. I would have to go back and do a lot more digging to think back in the early days, if any felt as big as this one here in terms of, again, not just names. I'm talking pure legacy and what people have done in their respective careers as champions to get to this point. One that we never got to see was George St. Pierre versus Anderson Silva. That would maybe take the cake over this one even, but we never got to see it. This is the closest thing to George St. Pierre versus Anderson Silva if we want to talk about the title reigns and what these fighters have done in their divisions. The greatest welterweight of all time is George St. Pierre. The greatest middleweight of all time is Anderson Silva. Well, the greatest light heavyweight of all time is Jon Jones. The greatest heavyweight of all time is Stipe Miocic. Take that up a notch by Jon Jones essentially being the undoubted greatest fighter of all time. I know you can say that for George St. Pierre. I used to say it for Anderson Silva. It's hard for me to have that argument nowadays, but there are other guys in the conversation, for sure. I understand it. But again, this is rare. This is a very, very rare fight. And for that reason alone, that is what is keeping me so engaged with this fight and still so very excited. Now just imagine if it wasn't that Tom Aspinall factor, just how much bigger this fight would feel. So I want to know how you're feeling about this fight. UFC 309 main event. Jon Jones, Stipe Miocic in Madison Square Garden. Truly a big fight feel. That is what this is here. But do you feel it? Are you excited for it? Or is all of the outside factors holding you back from reaching your true excitement potential for this fight? The Tom Aspinall being the interim champion. Jon Jones discrediting Tom Aspinall, saying he will not fight him. Jon Jones looking elsewhere toward Alex Pereira or even retiring. Stipe being uncertain on what his future could be if he gets the victory here. I want to know all of your thoughts on this fight because at the end of the day, it's not about the X's and O's. It's not about, oh, Jon Jones is good here, Stipe's good here. It is about legacy versus legacy. It is about history at UFC 309. If you enjoyed my thoughts on this UFC 309 title fight, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Every single week, I break down the biggest fights of every pay-per-view, every fight night, and everything in between. I also recap the most meaningful results from every card and give my thoughts and opinions on MMA news and fight announcements. You can join the community on social media at Verbal Spar MMA on X, Instagram, and TikTok, and you can follow on your favorite audio listening platform where every Friday and Monday podcast episodes release on Spotify, Apple, and more. Have a great weekend, enjoy the fights, and I will see you in the next video.